Good day once again, BEC111 students. We are continuing with our chapter 7, and in chapter 7, we are looking at planning. Planning, which is one of the management functions, as we saw in chapter 6. So we are proceeding with planning. Planning, basically, it is the fundamental management function, which involves deciding beforehand what is to be done, when it is to be done, how it is going to be done, who is going to be doing it. So basically, that is planning, deciding beforehand what needs to be done or what is to be done, when it is supposed to be done, how it is supposed to be done, and who is going to do it. It is also a process which lays down an organization's objectives and develops various courses of action by which an organization achieves the set objectives. In short, planning basically is thinking before action takes place, or thinking before action is actually taken. So it is very, very important that we understand what planning is, so that we can be on the same page. So for purposes of this chapter, these are the learning outcomes, what you are expected to at least know before the end of this chapter. Then this is the chapter outline, where we are going to look at the introduction, including defining planning, which I believe I have done. Then we look at the benefits and costs of planning, managerial goals and plans, what are the differences, the planning process, then the implementation of plans, and basically we're looking at planning. It will be done once we cover this. There is a saying, a common saying, which goes by, if you do not know where you are going, every road can take you there. So if you do not know what you want to achieve, if you do not know what you want to attain as a person, whatever you do can take you there. So as a person, as a manager, as a business, you need to plan so that you know what you are seeking to achieve. What is it that you seek to attain? That way, you will be able to tell if you are still on course or if you have actually derailed. If you are still in line to achieve your objectives, or if you are no longer going to be able to achieve them. So planning is very, very important. Planning actually also helps even in other processes like organizing, leading, and even in controlling. So it is very, very important. That's why we say it is the fundamental management function. It is very, very important for every manager to understand planning and to be able to plan, not only to understand planning. So the benefits of planning, basically planning has both advantages, and some would also claim that planning has disadvantages. And obviously, as they say, anything that has advantages is bound to have disadvantages. So the benefits of planning, we'll look at those first. Planning provides direction. If you set objectives, if you have a number of means to attain those objectives, at least you know what you want to attain. So everyone will work whilst they are aware of what really needs to be achieved. So planning in an organization, planning provides direction. Remember, planning can also be in the form of vision, mission, long-term objectives. So it gives people some sense of where the organization is going, some sense of what is it that the organization seeks to achieve. Planning also reduces the impact of change. For things that we can plan for change that we know that, okay, ABC is going to happen in the near future, you can actually develop some courses of action that you can take, so that the organization will still remain on course. so that you will not suffer the same way with those that will not have known that a certain variable in the environment is going to change. Planning also promotes coordination, especially within the same organization. If you know that we want to achieve this particular objective, and a certain department or a certain unit is working on this particular task from this day until a certain date, other functions can also plan ahead, because they can, in organizations, there are certain tasks that depend on other people or on other departments that can only resume once another task has been completed. So it promotes coordination. Planning also ensures cohesion, that departments, people, they work together in harmony. It creates that understanding and cohesion, smooth working within the organization. Planning also facilitates control. The control process starts with planning. It starts with the setting of goals and of objectives, and also formulation of the plans. So without planning, you cannot control, because what is it that you compare with what is on the ground? You need something on paper, something that you have targeted, something that you have planned, to compare with what is on the ground, to then assess or measure the deviations or if there are any differences. So planning also facilitates control. On the other side, planning, some people claim that planning actually may create rigidity, where there are set rules, where there are set guidelines, where there are set objectives, and people have already agreed that we'll do A, B, C before D, E, and F. Only after F, that's when we'll go and do other things. So there are instances where things have to change, and there are instances where you need to be a bit flexible in an organization. But if everything is supposed to go according to what was planned, that may create rigidity, especially in bureaucratic organizations. Planning can create rigidity. Planning also takes time. Planning takes time. It's something that it's a task that has to be done, and it takes time. So some may claim that no, instead of sitting down to come up with plans, to discuss plans, it's better to do other things, because planning consumes management time. Formal plans may also replace intuition and creativity. So it can actually limit creativity. It can actually limit innovation, because once other people had agreed that they would do the task in a particular way, everyone else must just implement and stop thinking. So in some way, especially in bureaucratic organizations, formal plans can actually replace intuition and creativity. Planning could also cause delays in decision making. Some say in cases where you have seen, where you see that there is a snake, maybe at a homestead, do you form a committee on how that snake must be killed, what strategies need to be implemented to kill it? So you will see that there are certain things that people will just do without really sitting down, evaluating the plans and so forth. So without really saying planning is not important, because it is, there are certain instances in an organization that may happen that will need a manager to take action and explain later. So it is in those instances that planning could actually cause delays in decision making. Going back to that proverb, or to that African proverb where they say you do not appoint a committee to kill a snake. Sometimes you need to take action, not to sit down and plan. The nature, okay, managerial goals and plans. Goals and plans. This implies that the heading there implies that there are differences between goals and plans. And obviously there are differences. In terms of goals, this is the starting point of the planning process. You need to set goals. Goals flow directly from the mission statement, and the focus of goals differ because different goals pertain to different aspects of the organization. Goals may be short, intermediate, or long-term, and goals may be publicly stated, and in some cases they may not be publicly stated. But it is important for me at this stage to clarify that there is a difference between goals and plans. Goals basically speak to the objectives. What is it that you intend to achieve? What is it that you seek to achieve? So goals, that's the ultimate objective. What is it that you intend to achieve? But when it comes to plans, this is the means to achieve the objectives. So if we would say goals reflect the destination, plans would then be the means to get there. That is, if we go back to that statement to say, if you do not know where you are going, any road can take you there. So if a goal is the destination, plans would then be the means to get to the destination. So you realize that you can have, even in cases where you have one goal, you may actually have a number of plans. Where you have one objective that you seek to achieve, you may actually have a number of ways to achieve that same objective. Okay, then the importance of goals. The same with planning. Goals provide guidance and agreement on the direction of the organization. They provide direction in the organization. The first step in the planning process, as you will see, is actually that of setting goals. So goals facilitate effective planning. You cannot plan when you do not know what you want to achieve. So goals facilitate effective planning. Goals can also inspire and motivate employees. If your employees know what the organization stands for, what the organization seeks to achieve, they will put all effort, they will do everything to their best to achieve those goals. Goals also provide a basis for effective evaluation of both the employee as well as the organization's performance. So they can also be used for control purposes, for evaluation purposes. Goals may be effective, they may as well also be ineffective, whereby people just sit down, they set what they call goals, but those goals may not be effective. So it is necessary for us as prospective managers or as management students to understand that there is a criteria for effective goal setting. And some use the abbreviation SMART for effective goal setting to say goals ought to be SMART. And by this we mean they ought to be specific, they ought to be measurable, they ought to be attainable, they ought to be relevant, and they must be time bound. So in terms of when we say goals ought to be specific, for purposes of this course, I think it's important for me to refer you to page 209 of your prescribed textbook, where they say when a goal is specific, it indicates what the goal relates to, the period to which the goal refers, and the specific desired results of that particular goal. It ought to be specific, not to be ambiguous, whereby even when you achieve it, people will not be sure on whether the goal has been attained or not. it ought to be specific. Goals should also be measurable, easily measurable. For instance, if you say you want to, as a goal, you want to increase profitability of an organization by 10%, it is possible to measure 10%. You can actually measure and assess on whether you have attained 10% increase in profit. So they ought to be measurable. Goals also ought to be attainable. They ought to be realistic, something that can be achieved. Not to set goals that you are sure that they cannot be achieved. So goals also ought to be attainable. They ought to be realistic. Goals must also be relevant. They ought to be relevant and in line with the vision of the organization, with the mission statement of the organization. They ought to be relevant and they must be time bound. For example, if an organization wants to achieve 10% increase in profitability, that particular goal must also be time bound. Is it per month? Is it per year? Or is it after a decade? So there must be specific timelines that are also attached to every goal. So basically, that's why we say goals ought to be smart. Continuing with managerial goals, there is a goal setting technique which is known as MB, or some call it MBO, but it's actually management by objectives. So management by objectives is a technique that is designed to achieve the integration of individual and organizational goals. As individuals, we have our own goals. Then the organizations that we work for, they also have their own goals. So there must be an integration of those individual goals and organizational goals. The management by objective process, how it happens, basically the manager and the employee, they must have an initial discussion to formulate a job description and key performance areas. These key performance areas are what they will then assess. So they will sit down, they agree on what the employee ought to be doing. Then they also agree on how performance will be assessed. Then the employee establishes potential key performance targets. Sometimes they will even allow the employee to set their own targets, to say this is what I want to achieve by the end of the year, in line with the job description, in line also with the key performance areas that we have identified. Then the employee and the manager, they mutually together establish checkpoints to measure the employee's progress. So they also agree on how performance is going to be assessed. When are they going to assess it? And how are they going to assess it? Then evaluation of degree of goal attainment is also done. So basically this particular management technique or goal setting technique gives employees that perception that they've been involved in decision making, that they've been involved in goal setting of an organization. So unlike circumstances or situations where as an employee you are told what you ought to achieve by your superior, in this case an employee will have that feeling that they actually came up with the goals. But remember, these goals are just integrated with the organizational goals. So in some way, it's a strategic way or a wise way of giving employees an opportunity to set goals that are in line with the organizational goals. So the management by objective as a technique, it can also be used to motivate employees. because every employee will be motivated once they realize that their voice is also heard. They are also involved in decision making. They are also involved in goal setting. So they will, once they have that perception that they are the ones who set an objective for themselves, they will put all effort to ensure that they achieve whatever that they will have set. Okay, now looking at plans, the nature of plans. Basically, as I had said, plans, these are basically the means to achieve an objective. So a plan is a blueprint for goal achievement. Managers consider alternative plans in order to select the best plan. As I had said, if you have one key objective that you want to achieve, there may be many ways to achieve it. As they say, there are many ways to kill a cat. Other ways work, others do not. Others, they don't have serious consequences, whereas others may actually have adverse consequences. So you need to be in a position to select the best plan. So in as much as you can come up with a number of plans, it is important for managers to then select the best plan. How do you know the best? Assess it in terms of timelines. Assess it in terms of available resources. Assess it in terms of efficient use of resources. And obviously other factors. External factors, strengths and weaknesses, and costs, they affect the chosen plan. So these are some of the factors that you consider. External factors, strengths within the organization, weaknesses within the organization, and also costs associated with the plan. They ought to be considered. The planning process. Planning is a process. It involves setting goals. It involves selecting the right way or the right means to achieve the goal. But when you are planning, there are variables of organizational planning that you also ought to consider. These include the vision of the organization or the purpose of the organization, the mission statement of the organization. What is it that the organization stands for that distinguishes it from other organizations? Basically, that's the mission statement. Then the environment in which the organization operates in. Look at both the external environment as well as the internal environment. Then the values of managers. What is it that they believe? What is it that they consider important? And also the experience of the management. These factors or these 5 variables are very important in the planning context or when planning. Now looking at the planning process, basically it is these steps. As you can see, there are just 6 steps. Let me also look at my notes so that I will easily refer to those. So the first step is to establish goals. And these are what we said they ought to be smart. They ought to be smart, as we discussed earlier. Then the second step will then be to develop alternative plans. You develop alternative plans. Come up with means to achieve the established goals. How can we achieve the established goals? Obviously, a number of plans may emerge, but not all of the plans work. So those plans will need to be evaluated. Evaluate them based on their on their costs, based on their strengths and weaknesses, so that you can select the one that works best. So after evaluation, you select the best plan. You implement it, and after implementation, you perform reactive planning. That is, if it is necessary. So the last step there is to see if the plan has actually worked. Did you manage to achieve what you wanted to achieve? If not so, then you perform reactive planning so that next time it will work. You assess why didn't it work, what can we remove, what can we include. Then you start the process again. Maybe it was only that you didn't choose the right plan. So this is the planning process depicted in a diagram. You can also see that on figure 7.1 in your textbook. Strategic goals, also goals can be, as we said, I remember we said they can be long-term, intermediate, or short-term. So strategic goals, these are long-term goals. They include a vision, a mission statement, and long-term goals. The vision, in terms of the vision, managers consider new possibilities to carry the organization into the future. This is mainly the purpose of the organization. Like, why does it exist? Some actually see the vision as what an organization aspires to be. What is it that they aspire to be? Then the mission statement spells out the main goal of the organization and also who they serve, how they serve them. Then the long-term goals are these stem from the vision and mission statement and include critical areas in a business such as profitability, productivity, competitive position, and some of those factors, including technological leadership and social responsibility. Strategic plans focus on organization as a whole over a period of 5 years. There are two levels of these have two levels. We have generic strategy and grand strategy. So generic strategies, they may also be seen as business strategies. These, they determine how best to compete in a particular industry or market. So generic strategies determine how best an organization can compete in a particular industry or in a particular market. Whereas grand strategies or corporate strategies, they focus on the scope of the organization and how the resources are to be used. In terms of corporate strategies, I'm sure you will see a number of those in your textbook, including issues of diversification, vertical integration, horizontal integration, and so forth. Then moving on, we also have tactical goals and plans. So going back to strategic goals, those are set by top-level managers, by senior managers, your CEOs, top-level managers. They are the ones who are responsible for coming up with the vision, mission, and long-term goals. But these tactical goals and plans, these ones, they are developed or formulated by middle-level managers, which are basically functional managers. So they are also known as functional goals and plans. Tactical goals and plans focus on how to carry out tasks required to achieve strategic goals. So in terms of distinguishing goals and plans, this is basically what we have done. Tactical goals are medium-term or short-term goals derived from long-term goals, and tactical plans, these are they have a more specific focus and they deal with people and actions. Then we also have operational goals and operational plans. These are also, they are developed by middle level managers as well as lower level managers. Operational goals, they are very short-term goals. They are no longer 1 year. they are not longer than 1 year, and they deal with the day-to-day operations or day-to-day activities. That's why they are actually referred to as operational goals. In terms of operational plans, these are short-term plans. Their purpose is to achieve operational goals. They can also come in two forms: single-use plans and standing plans. Single-use plans are normally used for activities that are less likely to be repeated. So single-use plans, these are developed to achieve a set of goals that are not likely to be repeated. But standing plans, they are ongoing, and they provide direction for tasks that are performed repeatedly in the organization. So that's how those two differ. The implementation of plans, there's need to develop a framework for execution. How are plans going to be executed? Leadership to set the plan in motion. So once you've decided on what you want to do and you have a way to do it, it has to be set in motion, and it takes leadership. There's also need to control to determine performance, to evaluate on whether what you actually want to achieve is what you have achieved. If it's about plans and a certain plan had been chosen or selected, you need to also evaluate if it has actually worked to achieve that particular objective. Reactive planning may be necessary. Yes, reactive planning may always be necessary. That once you realize that what you had planned is not good, the plan that you have selected is not working according to plan or according to what you had planned, you need to do reactive planning so that the goal can still be achieved. So basically, this is the summary. Planning is the starting point of the management process. What needs to be achieved, those are the goals of the organization. How to achieve the goals of the organization, those would then be plans to achieve the goals. Goals and plans can come in the form of strategic, tactical, and operational. Strategic goals and plans being long-term ones, tactical being medium-term ones, and operational being those short-term ones. Long-term goals, long-term, medium-term, or short-term, this is basically what we're discussing here, or what I was just trying to clarify here. So this is it about planning. If you have any questions, you are free to ask on Blackboard so that we can continue to interact. Ask questions, allow others to answer. Answer also questions that others ask, so that we can always have that discussion. We can always have that interaction. Thank you.